The sun is shining down on Redondo Beach in California on a blisteringly hot day at the end of July. On the pier not far from a packed ice cream shop, 4 kids are enjoying a recent acquisition, a large pepperoni pizza. Unbeknownst to them, they're being watched by 2 men. One of those men is an imposing figure standing at 6 foot 4 inches tall and of a muscular build from all the hard graft he's put in at the warehouse where he works in Compton. The 2 men, slightly buzzed after drinking, decide to play a game of truth or dare. The game will end with the men stealing a slice of pizza from those kids, gorging themselves and laughing at the same time. The men walk away. For this crime, one of the men received a life sentence with a minimum of 20 years to be served, a draconian punishment if there ever was one. For this, he became known as the patron saint of unfair sentencing, and his story had people scratching their heads from Dublin to New Delhi. What on earth is going on in the USA, the people wondered while reading the newspaper, some of them double-checking that it wasn't April Fool's Day or they weren't mistakenly reading satire. Indeed, what was going on in the USA? We'll get around to the man's fate later, but first we need to go back to the scene of the crime. It was committed on July 30th, 1994. The kids who were robbed were aged 7 to 14, and they'd just been to a place called Adam's Pizza. And just after they started chowing down on that mouth-watering pie, the 2 men approached. At first, they demanded a piece of the pizza, but the kids refused to hand any over. They didn't really have much choice, given the size of the men. Not long after, the 2 guys were arrested at Craig's ice cream shop on the pier. One of them was never convicted of a crime, while the other got 25 years to life, with 20 of those years to be served without the possibility of parole. He was 27-year-old Jerry Dwayne Williams. And okay, some of you might be thinking, well, you shouldn't steal from kids, but 25 years to life seems a tad harsh. Maybe a good telling off would be a more suitable punishment for the crime. But you first need to know why such a long sentence was handed down to this man. He didn't hurt the kids, by the way. There was no assault or anything like it. It just happened as we've said. The guys were messing around and did something stupid, and it has to be said, a little bit pathetic. Who takes pizza out of the hands of children? Still, it was hardly the crime of the century, so why the outrageous prison sentence? First, you need to know that Mr. Williams had committed 4 other crimes before the pizza heist. His priors were attempted robbery, a small drug possession, and unauthorized use of a vehicle. That still didn't put him anywhere near the highest-ranking menaces to society in the US. The sentence he received was befitting of a killer, a violent house invader, or a person that leaves serious trauma in the wake of his savagely attacking vulnerable people. Now you need to know about something called the 3 Strikes Law. We probably don't need to say this, but we will, just in case you don't know anything about the sport of baseball. We can forgive you for that, seeing as 95% of the world would rather watch paint dry than watch the game. In that sport, you get 3 chances to hit the ball. If you miss, it's called a strike. You get 3 strikes, you're out. In terms of the law, that means that offenders who keep offending are given severer sentences. The law was passed in 1993 and it was first implemented in 1994. You might be wondering, well, don't judges always look at previous convictions when handing down a sentence? And you'd be right to think that. The main difference is the 3 strikes law means judges don't have discretion. The law ensures repeat offenders get a long sentence, which is usually a life sentence or at least 25 years. Sometimes it's life without the possibility of parole, and that's something we'll get to soon. How it applies is different from state to state. What happened to Williams would almost certainly not have happened in some other states. It's complicated and we don't want to spend an entire show going through each state. Nonetheless, you should know that California used to be very strict in its implementation of this law, so Williams isn't the only person from the state that stood in court and almost passed out when the judge told him he'd be spending possibly the rest of his life. In the states of Georgia, South Carolina, and Tennessee, they have a 2 strikes law, but the crimes committed have to be the most serious crimes, such as murder or other violent offenses. As we said, it's complicated because in South Carolina, you can also get 3 strikes for lesser crimes, such as drug offenses, forgery, or burglary. And if that's the case, just as with the 2 serious strikes, you don't just get a life sentence, you get life without the possibility of parole. Before we come back to Mr. Williams, let's have a look at some very controversial applications of this law. A law, as you'll soon find out, many people think doesn't even work. The state in question is Texas, which has more people behind bars than any other state in the US. It's only in 6th place as to the proportion of people behind bars in terms of population, with the top spots going to Louisiana and Oklahoma. These states have the highest incarceration rates in the entire world, and that includes the developing world. The 3 strikes law has played a big part of this. Okay, so in spite of Texas never really solving its crime problem, it's been known as a tough-on-crime state for many years. In the 70s, it had its own kind of 3 strikes law. This is how it worked out for a person named William James Rummel. He fraudulently used a credit card and spent $80, for which he was sentenced to 3 years. When he got out, he passed a forged check to the value of $28.36. He got 4 years for that. A few years later, when he was once again enjoying his freedom, he complained that someone hadn't repaired his air conditioning unit very well. He refused to hand over the $120.75 bill for the repair. For that, he was convicted of felony theft. Because of the 3 strikes law in place, he was given a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Over the 9 years when his crimes took place, he'd stolen a grand total of $230. Let that sink in for a second. This was the law, so the judge did what he had to do, but it also caused controversy. The good news is, after appeals, Rummel got out of prison after 7 years. It also led to Texas changing the law, so 3 strikes could be sentenced to life with the possibility of parole. Still, life for a measly $230 would seem utterly crazy to most people living outside of the US. This is why the 3 strikes law is so controversial. It's why many activists in the US want judges to have discretion and not have their hand forced by a 3-strike rule. On the other hand, hardliners say, tough, commit the crime, do the time. Okay, so you also need to know a thing about crime classification if you want to understand this controversial law. In the US, you have things called infractions. These crimes are not serious at all, such as parking your car where it shouldn't be parked or dropping litter in the street. You don't usually do jail time for this, although people have done time for not paying traffic fines. Then you have misdemeanors, such as being wasted in public and causing a nuisance of yourself, or indecent exposure, or reckless driving, or petty theft, such as stealing a pizza slice. The thing is, there are classes of misdemeanors, and the classification might be different in each state. Also, if you get caught twice for the same misdemeanor, it can be promoted to a felony. If, say, you were a habitual pizza slice thief and you kept getting caught, the misdemeanors could turn into felonies, and you could in effect face life in prison. Then you have bigger crimes called felonies. They also have classes, so if you murder someone in cold blood for no reason other than the fact that you felt like doing it, it'll be a Class A felony or a Class 1 in some states. Still, as you know, forging a check, even if it's small, is a felony. So is burglary, tax evasion, or driving under the influence, or copyright infringement, or having in possession a bunch of psilocybin mushrooms. Not surprisingly, even though felonies are all deemed serious crimes, the sentence should be in proportion to the crime. Even if you're caught distributing magic mushrooms all over your town, you won't get the same sentence as a convicted murderer. As for drug kingpins, they definitely can get life sentences. There are people right now serving a life sentence without the possibility of parole for marijuana offenses. This is why some people think the 3 strikes law needs to be, struck. Back in California, you had the case of Dwayne Silva. He was 23 when he was sentenced to 30 years to life. The man had an IQ of 70, suffered from depression and hallucinations, and was most certainly mentally ill. He set fire to some trash and later to a glove compartment in a car, and then was caught stealing coins and a VCR from a neighbor's house. That was the 3 strikes. It was estimated his incarceration would cost taxpayers $500,000. We found more cases of people who hadn't committed serious felonies and then got hit with a very long sentence on the 3rd strike. One guy got life for stealing baby shoes, another got life for 0.14 grams of meth, another for 0.09 grams of heroin, another for theft of chocolate chip cookies from a restaurant. One man was sentenced to life for stealing a pair of gloves, while another got the same for stealing a pair of socks. A $14 haul was enough for one judge to give another man a life sentence, while another faced life for issuing drunken threats to a cop. In this case, the court said the man was no threat to society, and so it was regrettable that under the law, he had to serve life. Now back to the pizza thief. Let's recall that before picking on those kids, his worst crimes were arguably robbery and drug possession. Deputy Public Defender Arnold T. Lester said his punishment was cruel and unusual, saying that even if a person is a recidivist, such crime should never ever result in a life sentence. He told the media, "Seems to me that society is going crazy." He's had 25 years since then to see the incarceration rate skyrocket. Nonetheless, prosecutors and a good part of the public disagreed, saying they thought revolving door justice didn't work, and being soft on crime only leads to more crime. State Attorney General Daniel E. Lundgren said Williams was a career criminal, a thug who terrorized children. After the trial, he said he firmly believed that people could live in peace knowing their children were safe from Williams. The American Civil Liberties Union didn't agree. It had said since the 3-strike law has been in existence, the streets are not any safer. It said the only thing that's happened is prisons are bursting at the seams, and often people that go in for small crimes become addicted to drugs or commit crimes in prison under the duress of gangs. Rather than rehabilitate, prisons can have the opposite effect. So many go in, then come out and commit another crime. 3 strikes and prison becomes home for a long time. Some activists talk about prison arrest quotas and private prison quotas, saying that a prison industrial complex has been created in the name of profit, not justice or the well-being of the American people. They also argue that judicial discretion is the hallmark of any justice system. Many critics of the law say that if it evidently doesn't deter crime, what's the point of having it? They say the many billions that it costs for the trials and long-term imprisonment should be spent on education and social improvements such as better education and more opportunities for the poor. This, they believe, is the only workable deterrent to crime. We're not cherry-picking resources here. For the most part, academics and the media are saying this. You can find supporters of the law if you look hard enough, although, as the American Bar Association writes, when the empirical data is looked at closely, the law simply cannot deliver on its promises. Still, the association points out, like with the utterly and provably disastrous war on drugs, politicians seem unwilling to change anything. Being tough on crime, and of course drug crime, is often what gets them into power. Fighting crime is also an industry that would be hard to just undo. As for Williams, when serving time in Folsom Prison, he got the name Pizza Man, although he said most people who heard the name thought he killed a pizza delivery man. When inmates heard he'd gotten a life sentence for stealing a pizza slice, they didn't believe him. After serving 5 years, the law in California was slightly amended and he got out. The 3 strikes law is still there, but the severity of the crime has to be worse than stealing pizza to receive a life sentence. Still, nonviolent drug offenses count, as does burglary, as do many other nonviolent crimes. This is what Williams once said about his harsh sentencing. They sentenced me for my size and color. I can't help my size and color. I got 25 years for a $1.25 slice of pizza, and for what I did before, not what I did on that day. It's not because of 3 strikes, it's because I grew up. In 2003, he was charged with a misdemeanor, nothing more than a heated argument with his girlfriend at the time. He said that after that he felt like he was walking on eggshells, never knowing what small infraction could land him back in prison for a long time. If you liked that, you'll love Most Evil Prisoner Kept in Glass Box. This is equally shocking: why prisoner proven innocent can't be released.